Good morning, everyone. Well, I should say it's morning for me. I don't know, you might be watching this in the afternoon, the evening, I don't know, deep into the middle of the night. Who knows, teenagers and your sleep patterns, right? But it's early, so I'm having some coffee. But welcome to YouTube lecture number 3 for period 6. This one is going to focus on agriculture versus capitalism and how, again, this rising industrial society, what were causes of it and what are the effects of it. So our same focus question that we've been dealing with, right? What factors or causes combined to make the United States a mature industrial society after the Civil War? And today's effects, we're going to look at how it affected agriculture and farmers in particularly. So let's get into this concept. We're still in 6.1, but this time we're in Roman numeral 3. So there's new systems of production are coming. Industry will make farming much easier. New inventions are coming. New ways of farming are coming. New transportation modes. We know that the railroads, but they're also going to have what's called elevated grain silos are going to be invented so that a farmer can store their grains in these giant silos. But it's also going to hurt the farmer. The farmer is going to find out that the railroads especially will try to take advantage of them for this. But we'll get into that. Let's get into letter A here. So here, new inventions. This mechanization is happening, which helps to cause, right, the growth of industry, right? Better agriculture production is going to happen. We're inventing not only the mechanical reaper, but we have harvesters, we have eventually the combine. All of these things are going to make farming easier, right? But as it brings out here, increase substantially and contribute to decline in food prices. So it was better for the consumer, but if you think about it, when you decline in the price of food, you might help the consumer, isn't necessarily going to help the farmer. And so these things are going to come into conflict with each other. Now, corporate farming is coming as well. Eventually, we're going to get corporations like Post cereal. Kellogg will come later. When Americans fall in love with cereal, this is going to put pressure on the farmer to either try to sell independently or become part of a corporate farming system. And this becomes extremely controversial for many farmers and many people of the day. And again, I'm going to pause here to take a little sip of a beverage. So remember, whenever I do that, friends, you can do it too. Let's see if I can wake up again. Dry farming. Dry farming is when you're out in areas where there's very little rainfall or no way to really irrigate. So they came up with various techniques. You could plant specific crops, specific type of corn or wheat that is more drought resistant, or you can do what's known as moisture enhancing techniques. You could plant your seeds deeper in the ground where there's more moisture. You could also mulch the area. Excuse me. As you can also tell, I still have my cold, so I apologize for that. But by mulching, you actually delay evaporation. You keep the ground moisture longer periods of time. I'm going to have to take a sip of coffee here again. I'm in this now. I don't want to start all over, guys. Also, because of corporate farming, in economics, we call this economies of scale. Certain things are done better on a larger scale than just having a farmer. In corporations, they're going to have multiple farmers working for them so they can mass produce cereals, especially bread and things like that. Later on in the century, beer becomes very important. And then these same ingredients will be used in the brewing and manufacturing of beer. You know, we're going to get the Anheuser-Busch Corporation is going to emerge at this time period. So a lot of this stuff, farmers are depending upon these corporations. So there's mass production happening here of agriculture. You might also remember in class when we were doing the lecture on conquering the West and what happened with Native Americans, we pointed out at that time that during the Civil War, the Republican Party had created a system where both the farm and the factory can exist out west. So this was both good for production, it was good for the consumer, but eventually it's going to come to hurt the farmer. He becomes too reliant on corporation, too reliant especially on railroads and grain elevators that get invented, and railroads begin to charge farmers a lot. They would charge them more for what's known as a short haul than a long haul, and that expression is self-explanatory. If I don't have to take my grain from Iowa, from Kansas, from Nebraska. I don't have to take it all the way to New York City. I only have to take it to wherever the nearest factory is, and these corporations are building factories out west, so it's a shorter haul. But the railroads would charge higher prices for that. They would charge to use the grain elevators. You're going to take your product on a railroad, it's going to stop at a place, and these massive silos, you're going to have to put them up there using these elevators to store them up in the silo. They're going to charge a lot for that. Then another train's going to come and get that product and use the grain elevator to put it back in their train. They're going to charge you again for that. This really began, the farmer really begins to feel the pinch of what is happening to them, and they want government to help them. But at this time, laissez-faire economics. The presidents side with industry. We've already talked about labor. During these strikes, government's not helping labor. Labor had to help itself. Same thing with agriculture at this time. Time to take another sip of a beverage. B tells us how farmers respond to this. With all this consolidation of the agricultural markets, their overdependence of the evolving railroad system, they created for themselves either local or regional, what we call cooperative organizations, where they all work together in cooperation. The largest of which is the National Grange Patrons of Husbandry. Grange comes from an old Latin word that basically refers to farming, and husbandry is when you're working with farm animals. Oliver Hudson Kelley is the founder of this. He had worked for the federal government in the agricultural department. He was commissioned by actually President Andrew Johnson during Reconstruction to check on the farming conditions, the agricultural conditions of the South after the Civil War. He found it completely terrible. He winds up quitting the government, and he forms this cooperative to try to help farmers, give them a better sense of the newer techniques, the technologies, also to give them some social interaction. Farmers live very isolated lives because if you've got a 500-acre farm, a 1,000-acre farm, your nearest neighbor, it's not next door. So this gave them a lot of social interaction, and through that social interaction, farmers become more and more politically minded. They start sharing their ideas, their concerns with each other. While the Grange never becomes a political party, they are going to try to affect politics, especially in the state of Illinois. Many farmers there, many of them turn to the Grange. Now, if you remember, farmers believe of themselves as descendants of Thomas Jefferson ideology, agrarian concepts. So farmers, generally speaking, are Democrats. Not all of them, we can't say all of them, but for the most part. So through the democratic system, sometimes also finding Republicans that were favorable towards farming, they got certain laws passed in the state of Illinois to help them fight the railroads. They collectively were known as Granger laws, to regulate railroads, to tell railroads you've got to list your prices, because they would notoriously never tell farmers how much they were going to charge them for this or charge them for that. Oh, look what happened here. I hit that by accident. How much you're going to charge for a short haul versus a long haul, and just try to play fair. And so they passed these series of laws, and of course railroads fought them. They didn't like this, and 2 Supreme Court cases are going to come out of that. Now we're going to focus on these 2 cases in class. That's going to be the focus of these concepts. As you notice in class, we take one particular aspect of what our video lesson is, and we spend some time on that. And it's going to be Munn versus Illinois, Wabash versus Illinois. In the Munn case, I'll just tell you, the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Grange. But 9 years later, in the Wabash case, they're going to shoot these laws down. And it has to do with the 14th Amendment. As I told you, the 14th Amendment is going to stay with us for a long time. And there's a part in there about due process. What is due process? Well, I want to spend time in class to tell you that, but that becomes the basis of this. When the Grangers lose the Supreme Court case Wabash in 1886, it basically, their entire movement falls apart. And men begin to leave the Grange. They become, depressed and disparaging, right? They felt like they fought a fight and they've lost the fight. But they haven't completely given up. We get to letter C. Now, some of these men begin to say, our problem was we weren't a political party. We're going to have to create a party. And the People's Party, or what collectively becomes known as the Populist Party, emerges, which is going to call for a stronger governmental role. They want more regulation. They want the American economic system to be controlled by the government. This was a revolutionary thought. It's very socialistic in nature for a lot of people. And they will become one of the greatest third-party movements in American history. And again, we got to think, too, some of the causes that led us here. We've spoken quite a bit now about the crime of 73, that first big, long depression that happens in America. The federal government took silver out of the system, and that angered farmers, it angered miners, it angered debtors. So that was a beginning of farmers thinking we can't trust the government. Then they got collective groups like the Grangers together, try to fight big business, monopolies, the railroads specifically, but eventually they failed because, again, government turned against them. The Supreme Court rules against them. Now you have two different alliances that are left, the Northern Farmers Alliance and the Southern Farmers Alliance. And the issue becomes political party. The Northern Alliance wants to create a third party. Southern Alliance basically want to stay in the Democratic Party. So what's going to happen is the Northern Alliance is going to form this populist party, known as the People's Party, but we today, to this day, we call them the Populists. And gold and silver is going to become an issue. They want 16 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. They want more paper in the system. They want better regulation of monopolies, especially the railroads. They're going to call for child labor laws. They're going to call for the 8-hour work week. They're going to mirror a lot what the labor unions have been fighting for as well. And a lot of things seemed, they were very popular with people, but it also scared more conservative-minded people, both in the Democratic Party and, of course, the Republican Party. They formed in 1890. 800 delegates will meet in St. Louis. They want to reform the government, right? They want to make the government more responsive to the economic system. They want the government to take better control of industry and regulate it. Regulation. The Knights of Labor, which we spoke about in depth in class. What's left of them also came here. Remember that whole Haymarket incident has ruined them, but they see an opportunity perhaps to reinvent themselves and get involved in this political movement. James Weaver, a former Union general, and Tom Watson, an Irish immigrant, are the basic founders of this. And you can see this cartoon here, right? Here's this hot air balloon. It's called the Platform of Lunacy. Lunacy, right? Crazy. Obviously, this is an anti-populist cartoon, and the balloon is made of patchworks. Farmers Alliance, anarchists, communists, old greenbacks. Remember we talked about the Greenback Party, Knights of Labor. You've got women suffrage here, old Grangers, socialists, free silver, prohibition, and it's all made of quilt patches. So there's hot air coming out of it. Yeah, the Republican Party saw this as really not that big of a threat. And then the Panic of 1893 is going to happen, a bigger economic downfall, which we'll also talk about in class. I also want to mention Mary Elizabeth Lease. She is considered the queen of the populist movement. She's a writer. She's a suffragette, an author, as I said. She's written books. She gives lectures and speeches. She joins this movement as well because she's from Kansas, so she becomes known as the Kansas Cyclone. Now, she may or may not have ever said the expression, less corn, more hell, but it becomes a popular slogan of the day. If you think about it, what it means, farmers feed us all. So if we stop growing, right, and raise a little hell, maybe the government, maybe the people would actually listen to us and understand why we have these concerns. But again, people reacted that this farmers movement is nothing. But this election of 1896 is going to be one of the pivotal elections in American history. And it's something we'll actually discuss more in class. I'm going to go ahead and go and, wait, what's going on here? What's happening? Why did this do this? What? A blank screen. Oh my word! Oh my word! Oh, what has happened here? That's the Wicked Witch of the West. Oh, the Wizard of Oz. We'll talk later, people. Bye-bye.